my daughter, who's 16, and her friend and myself listened to your debate with Sam Seder.
Oh,
and
no.
We have a kind of guilt by association. We can't even talk to.
If you can identify one bad opinion on a person, they become like this ontologically evil person, like everything
Correct.
about them. And you only need one bad opinion. And sometimes you don't even need that.
I've reached out to, I don't even know how many people to have that conversation on the left. Nobody will have that conversation with me. So then you talk to people on the right about it, and what do people on the left do? Boghossian's a tool for the right.
This is my life right now, right? Because he's all of Destiny's friends are Nazis, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well.
He's a tool for the right.
Yeah, the people that are far right are the only one who want to talk. Literally, all of you guys have said, you're not going to talk to me. I'm a bad faith actor. I'm unwilling to engage in good faith conversation. I'm a far right conservative. It's like, okay, well then, what am I supposed to do? Lock myself in a closet and not talk to anybody?
So this is the game. This is the game they play. So I'll throw in things that you may want to think about that could help the conversation. Instead of saying, okay, even that, so let's go back to that one. Instead of
can I say this here? Definitely.
You can say anything here, son. This is a free speech zone.
Absolutely, that's great. I would say
there's not sort of a representative, holistic, inclusive feeling, especially from up on high. We're looking down and we see this statement being made. We're curious about it. We're also just worried about the harm being done to passersby.
What is the harm?
So there are people who went home because it was so triggering and
we had some students.
Because like this question just opens up the floor for like transphobic people to spread transphobic rhetoric. So like, why would you do that? Like, what is the point of this?
I am gender nonconforming. I use they, them pronouns. Do you know what that means?
I believe so, yes.
Are you aware of like the theory of social constructionism?
Yes.
So
I'm a gender studies scholar.
Yeah.
Because you're a gender studies major, right? Or
Not a major, no.
Not a major.
I'm one of the world's foremost experts in
gender studies.
Not leading. I'm in the top 10.
No.
They can't define anything they
You
want.
can't define it as a pastrami sandwich. That's a joke. Like, that's literally a joke.
We came down here to try and understand where you're coming from.
Did you?
We don't care about your thought experiment. We care about
The impact.
The impact.
So you didn't come down to understand. That's why I asked you to please be honest. My name is Peter Boghossian, and Boghossian, and let's see. I'm trying to bring critical thought, civil discourse back into
Keep hating
vogue,
your life then,
change
working
some
class
more mind.
Andy.
I wrote a book, How to Have
Tweet out
Impossible
that you will be
Conversations.
debating
I'm writing
socialism.
another
You
book,
sit at the table.
which is proving to be it's a fiction book. It's a young adult book, which is proving to be more difficult than I thought. A mad respect for people who write fiction and do it well. I have a nonprofit. I'm on Twitter, Peter Boghossian, and I just entered the YouTube space a few months ago. That's been interesting, been an interesting experience. But I listened to I got an astonishing number of people who told me that we should have a conversation. And I've been truly busy lately, but I managed to listen to some of your debates, and wow, I found them to be quite interesting. I didn't listen to a lot of the whole things, but I found them to be really interesting.
I have to push you a little bit. What does that mean? Interesting. That can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah, you have a minute for a story. I don't know how long we're supposed to talk.
I have all the time in the world, as much as you want. I stream for 10 hours a day, so it's as soon as you're...
Oh, wow. Holy moly. I think this is my first stream, so you're...
Oh, nice.
I was going to say a vulgarity, but I won't say it.
You can be, as long as you're not racist, you can be as vulgar as you want.
Yeah,
okay?
Yes, you're busting my cherry here.
Yeah,
so
okay.
Bursting
That's a good one.
whatever the expression is. No, so I was driving my daughter around and her friend, and I said, they got in the car, and I said, hey, I'm sorry, I've just been really busy, and I need to listen to this in the car, because I wanted to listen to some of the stuff you did before I had a conversation to you. Not that would necessarily make a difference. I'll talk to just about anybody. My golden rule is you cannot have harassed me in the past, then I will not speak to you.
Okay, gotcha.
Seems like a pretty low bar. But I listened to your my daughter, who's 16, and her friend and myself listened to your debate with Sam Seder.
Oh, no. The most recent one about Rittenhouse? Or a different one?
Let's see, when did that one? This was like a week and a half ago.
Yeah, there was a really recent one I did about Rittenhouse, and then it turned into like Citizens United as well. But
yeah, so she said to me, so that my daughter's friend said that really the most interesting thing to me. She said, she said, I'm so grateful he is not my father.
Which one? Me or Sam Seder?
Sam Seder. And I said,
Okay.
well, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? And she said, he just wants to be right.
Yeah.
And it was just such an interesting comment to be, such an interesting observation by a 16-year-old girl. And particularly to situate that in the context of her life and her adolescence. But I think when two people love the truth and they come together and they have a conversation, that's immediately apparent, as opposed to, pushing a point of view or a narrative or an unwillingness to revise one's belief. My friend Reed Nicewonder suggests an idea. I have no idea what we're going to talk about today, but my friend Reed Nicewonder, this is his actual name, suggested something to me that we talk about that I thought it was interesting. How we could use street epistemology, like we could explore a claim together, for example, one of your beliefs, and we could street epistemology it. And then maybe if you found that useful, you could perhaps use some of those tools in your future debates. Just an idea. I'm open to talk about anything. So
yeah, picking up new tools for conversations is always a lot of fun for me, because obviously talking to people, especially depending on the topic, is very, very, very challenging. To get them to even really engage in the conversation can be a challenge, let alone, and that's before we've even tried to convince anybody of anything or get somebody to reconsider anything. So picking up new tools is always fun.
And the reason for that is what? Is it specifically you, or is it your content, or what?
There's a million reasons. It could be because of me, something I've said in the past, or something that somebody politically aligned with me has said in the past. It could be because of them, or something they've said in the past, or something somebody politically aligned with them said in the past. It could be the topic. It could be the time and setting.
Okay.
There's a million different psychological biases that people might have for different things. It just,
Okay.
Yeah, it super depends on the conversation. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
So those are things I'm interested in. Before I hop into that, so this is something that I'm kind of curious about, and this is it's such a huge issue for me. Okay, I'll tell you a short story. So a long time ago, I've been streaming for about 12 years now. One of the first people to start. I've always been decent at speaking, debating, getting my point across and all of that. I used to have I called it gamer bro politics. But basically, economically, I'm cool with welfare and social programs and all of that, and that's fine. And then socially, I'm pretty left leaning. Gay people are cool, but I hated feminists and SJWs. I would say 7-8 years ago, that was my whole political kind of character. And something that I noticed was, after having conversations for a long time, I'll bring up one issue especially. I got really irritated by hearing minority types say, I want representation in media. I want representation in media. And I'd always say, who cares who the main character is? It shouldn't matter, right? I can empathize with a woman. I can empathize with a black person. I don't care who the main character is. You shouldn't either. And a lot of people back me up on this. And I get a huge community. Yeah, Destiny's so smart. He makes these great arguments. And there was a thing that happened where a new FIFA game came out, which is they play football, soccer. And the main character was Hispanic. And the pushback on the internet to this was crazy. Everybody was I don't want to play a game with a Hispanic main character. This is weird. This guy's from South America, blah, blah, blah. And when I saw that, I felt like such an idiot, because I was I thought I was making really good arguments, but in reality, I've just been a useful idiot for these guys, pushing ostensibly, I guess, a right-wing message. I didn't even realize it. I thought I was just making good arguments, but people were just following me because they liked the conclusion I had, not the thought process, not what I was saying. And so after some number of years, I grew, matured. Now I make more left-wing arguments. And then I had the same thing happen where I push for very far left social values. I talk about different types of things. And then I realized around 2018, 2019, holy shit, this just happened again, except now left-wing people have co-opted my message. So, I'll make criticisms of certain things. Yeah, and I'm fuck. Yeah. I'm trying to say things okay, yeah, maybe we shouldn't body shame. Maybe we shouldn't make fun of people for being gay, et cetera, et cetera. And then somebody like Pete Buttigieg rolls along, and there are people tweeting out, calling him the F slur and stuff. And it's well, it's okay because he's in a higher class white person, blah, blah, blah. I was wait, what?
Okay, well, that's okay, so keep going.
Yeah, so basically, I'm in this mind-fucked world where whenever, I don't know if you've gotten this, and you might be one of these people actually, so maybe we'll fight about this, I'm not sure. Anytime I hear somebody say I don't want to push a political agenda, I just want to talk about the truth, instantaneously I think, you're a fucking partisan hack. I know you are, and I'm about to figure out why. Because everybody that says they want to focus on the truth is usually just some hugely anti-establishment, oh, well, I know the truth. It's basically the opposite of everything the government says. And so
let's linger on that for a second. Mm-hmm. So that's really easy to get around. So when someone tells you they're interested in the truth, just ask them, okay, so what conditions under what conditions would you be willing to change your mind?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's how I try to avoid mindfucking myself. Yeah, that's one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what you just said is the higher level of that. In philosophy, that's called defeasibility. But it's a kind of disconfirmation. You're saying, okay, so you're interested in the truth. I'm interested in the truth. So you can just do a little. Once you understand what the claim is, well, there's one step in. So let me just run this. As a suggestion by you. So the first order of business is to figure out exactly what the claim is, and so. Often we're talking to people, and so I think I understood your story, but I'm not sure I understood your story. So I'll repeat back to you. So you mean, for example, and then I'll say, I don't know, whatever you just said, like when you're having conversations with somebody, the thing that I thought was interesting in that, the thing that punched home to me was that you've been a useful idiot, or you perceive that you've been a useful idiot for people. I mean, there was a lot going on there. There was also the thing, what does adequate representation mean? And, I think the two things come to mind, the black teachers and student achievement. And I do jujitsu pretty seriously. And there's a purple belt, young female purple belt who teaches class. And I see a lot of the young women go in and take her class. And it's very interesting to me. So, I mean, we can, talk about that, but okay. So you're talking to someone and they say, I love the truth, and your perception is they're a partisan hack. So here's a simple thing that I'll hopefully you and your listeners will be able to use this. First thing you need to do is you need to understand the claim. Like, what exactly is it that they're talking about? And then you need to repeat back to them what the claim is. But you need to put the onus on yourself. So what I'm hearing is, let me make sure I have this correct. Not, is this what you're saying? Like, so you put the burden of clarity on yourself.
Yeah.
And then you're looking from hostage negotiations. You're looking for that's right. If someone says that's right. If they don't say that's right, if they just say, yeah, that's good enough. And then there's one other thing that I didn't mention that I'm going to throw in here that really changes the whole conversation. When I figured this out and started using this, it completely changed the way that I had conversations with people, transformed it. Once you understand what the claim is, and you understand it because you ask, am I clear? Do I have this right? And they say yes. Once that's the case, you can ask them to put it on a scale. On a scale from 1 to 10, how confident are you in that? There are only so many things people can say to that. I'm happy to run through. There are only 4 things people can say to that. And then you immediately ask a disconfirmation question or defeasibility question. Okay, so under what conditions would you be willing to change your mind? So you're 7. So you're whatever you said, homosexual, gay marriage, or that's a big thing right now. Or I just read something that was really interesting to me. They want to, I read it on Army News, they want to take back the medals of soldiers at Wounded Knee. And I just think that's such an interesting topic, maybe to me and not to you or nobody else. But so you're having a conversation with someone, they make a claim, you ask them to put it on a scale, and they say that they're 9. So that's interesting. What would it take you to be an 8? Like, what would it take to change your mind? So even if they are an ideologue, you get a kind of window into their thinking. You get a glimpse. I mean, you can do other things. You can do a lot of stuff with scales, so you can get a guided tour of their epistemology. Yeah. But that's a really good way. It's also a really good way to avoid he said, she said, yes, it is, no, it isn't, etc.
Yeah, I agree. There's as I've done like my whole political thing, I like that you bring this up. I always say, because people always ask me like, how do you know you're being fair? How do you know if you're being biased or not? I like to hope that I'm being more fair than most, but my biggest fear is always like falling into like the big circle jerk and then realizing like 5 years later, like, holy fuck, I've been in an echo chamber for so long and I'm missing like,
totally 100%.
Yeah. You're familiar.
100%. So, right.
Go ahead. No, you're good. Keep going.
That's such an important point. So one thing you said before that relates to that is you want to impose these ideas on yourself. Like you want to impose a kind of corrective mechanism on yourself so that you're not held hostage to audience capture. Yeah. And I think the important thing there is that that's an attitudinal disposition, right? It's an attitude that you have toward the truth. And the key there is, are you willing? So this is what I always ask myself. And, audience capture is a really big problem. Echo chambers are a really big problem, particularly today when people don't speak across divides and gulfs. I always impose that question on myself. My dissertation I did in prisons, and I used the Socratic method to help inmates desist from crime. And the highest level of this that you can do is when people impose this on themselves. Under what conditions am I willing to change my mind? What would that look like? And am I really willing to change my mind? And how confident am I in this? If I'm 9 confident, that's like when you do the exercise, you see that little Likert scale, strongly agree.
Yeah, you always have them stand to the lines and then see if they can move.
Yeah. So and I always ask people that question, like, what would it take for you to change your mind? What would it take for you to move 1 line? But the key there is you should always be asking yourself, what would it take for me to move my mind? You should have a kind of sincerity with yourself. And as long as you do that, I don't mean to sound cheesy, but with an open mind, an open heart, even as long as you're sincerely willing to revise your belief, it's less likely that you'll be held hostage to your own delusions.
Yeah, true. Okay. Okay. So I agree. I was going to say the 2 things, because obviously being online, audience capture is a huge issue for a variety of reasons, not just ideological, but financial as well, right? Like you might actually have a financial incentive to be captured by your audience, and trying to buck against that could be challenging sometimes. The 2 questions that I would always tell people, because people always ask me, how do you avoid getting like mind fucked and you're in a big circle jerk? And the one thing is the first thing that you brought up. I'd always say that, like, if you can't ask yourself, what would it take to change your mind on a position? If you don't have an answer to that, then you don't believe that for a reasonable reason. There's something else that's holding it, because if you weren't reasoned into it, you can't be reasoned out of it. And if nothing could change your mind on it, then why?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Hold on.
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. So 2 things there. Sorry to keep interrupting.
You're totally good. Go for it.
Your stuff is so pregnant with.
Yeah.
So the first thing is you should never ask. So my golden rule is I would never ask anybody a question that I wouldn't be willing to subject myself to.
Always. Yeah.
And some people don't do that. So they can dish it out, but they can't take it. So if there's
a quick thing just on that. There's a quick thing when I'm debating somebody, I'll ask like, well, why would you say this? And sometimes I'll get this exasperated, like, come on, nobody knows, blah, blah, blah. And the challenge I'll give to that is like, well, here, ask me that same question and I will tell you exactly what I'm talking about. Like, because I can do everything I'm asking you to do. I'll gladly do it for mine. And then you can attack me if you think that my methodology is flawed. But yeah, I agree 100%. You should always be willing to answer the question you're asking. Yeah.
Yeah. And on that note, so I wrote about this in my first book, or I can't remember, published. I can't remember where it was, but so if they say, well, blah, blah, you say, no, ask me, literally ask me. I had a conversation with a guy and when I was on tour in Australia, who's head of this Muslim association. And I asked him if he thought women should be stoned to death for adultery. And he couldn't, he was saying, I don't know what the fuck this guy was talking, stories about the prophet. And so finally I just said, ask me that question. And he keeps trying. I said, no, ask me. He said, no. I said, no, literally ask me the question. And he said, do you think women should be stoned to death for adultery? I said, no. Do you think women should be stoned to death for adultery? He said, yes. So it's a way to cut through the noise.
Yeah.
Like asking people. So, but the key in that, what I started with is never ask someone a question, never dish it out unless you're willing to take it. Never ask someone what it would take to change their mind unless you're willing to be asked that question.
For sure.
And then always have a response to that question. And you know what a great freaking response is that we don't have in the society now? I
don't know the answer. Yeah.
I really don't know.
Sometimes people will donate and ask me like, what do you think about like this particular thing that's going on? And the willingness to be able to say like, I'm not entirely sure. I haven't looked into it, so I don't have a strong opinion right now. Ask me in a week or whatever. Maybe I'll look it up.
And instead of making you look like an idiot, you should be given a fucking award for that response.
Sure, yeah.
Like that's a great response. So as long as we have people who openly say they don't know, particularly if they have institutional power or an authority, we won't create cultures where people pretend to know things they don't know.
I super disagree. I
really?
agree with you on the micro level, but I see scary things happen on the macro level. If I'm opposed to 2 or 3 other commentators and somebody comes to me and they're like, Desi, what do you think about this thing? Steven, what do you think about that or that? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't have the info yet. This happens so much with breaking news. People's like, do you think the cops were right or wrong to shoot that guy? And I was like, I don't know. I watched a video. I kind of need more information. I might be intellectually honest and say like, I don't know. I'm willing to admit that. But then what happens, unfortunately, is some people jump to the next guy who is willing to say, I know what happened. They trained cops to shoot people like that. Or that black guy didn't deserve that. Or that black guy did deserve that. And it's like, fuck. You see the audience being siphoned off to the people that are willing to stake out the indefensible, but way more entertaining and way more hardline political claims. Like,
true. No,
you know?
so maybe there isn't just, so maybe there isn't disagreement. So that might be a good short-term strategy, but in the long term, you'll maintain your integrity and your audience will know that.
True. My next disagreement would be like, I don't know if integrity, unfortunately, is a thing that matters sometimes to because I'll see people get things wrong so much. It's a big issue in my side of the internet, and I'm trying to escape kind of some of the online bubbles I'm in, but it's not like it's unique here. But when it comes to the breaking news thing, is something I'll focus on a lot. People will be wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong, and I'll point that out. I was like, bro, you were wrong about that, and that. Why are people still listening to you? Like, I don't understand. You've made so many horrible claims, and things have turned out completely the opposite. But I think that people's media brains are so short-term sometimes that they don't even remember. And more importantly, actually, forget what I just said. The short-term thing doesn't matter. I think that it's more of an insight into why people engage with media the way they do. And it's not really for fact-finding or for information. That's not true. I think they engage with it because it reinforces kind of like social norms or social values. And at that point, the factual part can become...
I was going to say belief confirmation.
Exactly, and the fact part isn't really that important because people will listen to things for fact. If they go on to a YouTube channel for cars,
100%,
and somebody
100%.
tells you how to turn your car on and they're doing it wrong, they'll stop listening to that person almost immediately. You'll break the cycle, whatever operant condition. You try one thing, no reward, it doesn't work. I'm never listening to that guy again. But when it comes to politics, we engage with that in a fundamentally different way, where it's all about the reinforcement.
So here's what I've learned in the last 30 years of studying and publishing and reading and extensively about this stuff. So, okay. So, the sidewalk game that we do, that epistemological exercise, we place people on the lines. The thing that I've learned is, so what you just said, something like if someone's wrong about fixing your car, they just stop, they won't listen anymore. What's interesting about moral questions, and almost all political questions are at some level moral questions, budgetary allocations are moral questions. What I've learned is that people will hold a belief not based upon the evidence they have for that. In fact, they'll usually find the evidence after they've formed the moral belief. Like, so they have these moral intuitions about things, and then they'll look at their epistemic landscape to populate it with evidence. So here's the kicker what I was going to get. People will stand on those lines not based upon the evidence they have, or less so the reasoning, but because of a moral reason. Like, I'm a good person, good people stand on this line, I'll stand on this line. So their conception of what it is to be a good person determines the line they stand on, and then they look for evidence subsequent to that. That's why I think it's really important, getting back to the I don't know thing, that's why I think it's really important that we have to create a culture where not only are people praised for saying I don't know, but they're praised for changing their mind. Like, changing your mind becomes a good thing. Revising your beliefs in the face of evidence becomes a good thing. Listening to somebody. So now we have a kind of a toxic environment in two senses. One, there's guilt by association. I just read something this morning about, I'm not a Harry Potter fan. See, I can't even pronounce it at all. But I read there's some game that they do.
Quidditch?
Yeah, Quidditch, and they have that's right. They have a stick or something. But anyway, they want to change the name of the game to separate themselves from the author, right? Who allegedly...
Oh, because of the J.K. Rowling turf stuff.
Right. So, which is another conversation entirely. But what was interesting to me about that was we have a kind of guilt by association. Like, we can't even talk to people who disagree. Like, we have to kind of... Their very presence is it's such a contamination that... Are you getting live stream thing, like people texting you and stuff to talk about?
Oh, there's like chats in front of me, but I'm listening to you. Don't worry about them.
Oh, no. I wasn't worried. Neither here nor there. I'm just curious.
People are linking the CNN story now that Quidditch is changing its name to Quadball to cut ties with J.K. Rowling. Jesus Christ.
So that's a huge cultural problem. It might seem silly and it might seem laughable, but there's something deeper and more emblematic of a problem that's there. And that problem is that we've created a culture where if somebody, like when we started our conversation, if someone says one thing, you don't want to talk to them, or I can't be associated with this guy, he believes this about X.
Yeah.
Well, that's why. That's a very ahistorical. That's a very recent cultural phenomenon. My parents had Republicans. My parents were blue collar Democrats, but they had, friends of all different viewpoints. But there's something particularly insidious about that. Something very divisive about that.
Yeah. I just had it's impossible to explain how ridiculous the lead up to all this is. But I had a huge stream where I wrote out a huge document detailing some of my problems with people, and there's a whole section about this. Essentially, that like it's because there's two parts to this actually. So the first part is that if you can identify one bad opinion on a person, you can essentially they become like this ontologically evil person, like everything about them. And you only need one bad opinion. And sometimes you don't even need that. Sometimes you just need one association with somebody with one bad opinion, right? It might be like, you say you believe this thing, but you're friends with that guy and he's in a group and they believe that thing. There's 100%. No way. Yeah, and it becomes so infectious that every part gets infected with it. Yeah.
That's right. Here's I was thinking about when you were talking a game that's frequently played on the left right now. And that is, you want to talk to somebody, or I'll want to talk to somebody, and there's an exception. David Pakman is the only exception as far as I know to this, but you'll want to talk to somebody about something. You want to talk to people on the left about something. You'll reach out over and over to people and they won't have you on. They won't talk about it. You believe that the story, whatever it is worthy of talking about. Just one example that comes to mind. The president of my former university, Portland State, ask your listeners if you don't mind to pull up the exact quotation, said that racial justice should be the highest priority of the institution.
Gotcha.
And Portland State University is a public institution. And so I've reached out to, I don't even know how many people to have that conversation on the left. I mean, I put it on my Twitter, I called, I've emailed people. Nobody will have that conversation with me. And just so that you know, Portland State University is a public institution. They receive public taxpayer funds. I think that is a really important thing for us to have a conversation about. No one will talk to you. So then you talk to people on the right about it, and what do people on the left do? Boghossian only talks to people on the right. Boghossian's a tool for the right.
This is my life right now, right? Because he's all of Destiny's friends are Nazis and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, well.
He's a tool for the right.
Yeah, the people that are far right are the only one who want to talk. Literally, all of you guys have said, you're not going to talk to me. I'm a bad faith actor. I'm unwilling to engage in good faith conversation. I'm a far right conservative. It's like, okay, well then, who am I supposed to do? Lock myself in a closet and not talk to anybody?
So this is the game. This is the game they play. This is the game. So they won't talk to you. So the moment you talk to somebody on the right, you're a Nazi.
Yeah.
Or you're conspiring with Nazis.
Or you're legitimizing their points of view, or like you're talking about something that shouldn't even be up for debate. Why would you have a debate about this thing? Are you trying to say that that's even worth talking about? And it's like, well, I mean, half the country disagrees with you, so it seems like it would be, but.
So that's the other thing that's interesting. We have a lot of people who genuinely believe, I think the abortion thing in the recent Supreme Court case, I think that we have a lot of people who genuinely believe that they're so convinced of what's true. They're so their moral brain is in hyperdrive, is in override, that it's overridden their rational brain, and that's why they view any conversation that you have with someone as a taint on you.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you're going to get a lot of shit from talking to me. I don't have any idea if I get a lot of shit from talking to you, but I assume I. But here's the hard pill to swallow. And this took me, I wish I could go back in time and tell myself this like 5 years ago. Some people have absolutely nothing of substance to contribute. Literally nothing. In the same way that I wouldn't take advice from someone about how to fly a plane who doesn't know about how to fly a plane. Why would I take criticism from that person? It doesn't even make any sense. But I think for so long I've thought, and this could be I don't know if this is true. I've thought about it, but it could be this idea that, I really want to be willing to revise my beliefs. I really want to be I really want to clean up my thinking. I want to be sincere with myself and honest with myself and other people. And I really need to listen. And I really, you keep searching for something of substance that they have, but there is nothing of substance. It's all predicated upon, silliness.
I know you don't know anything about me, but it's just funny because we've made all these exact like people in my chat are typing that you're me in 15 years or whatever. It's the exact same thing as what I've uncovered, like convo after convo after convo. I could give you a million examples. I argued with a guy who was incredibly upset about like, this is the worst thing that'll happen to me. Somebody will give me a story and they'll be indignant about it. They'll be upset. Like, I can't believe that Google is doing this thing. I remember I had a conversation with a guy. He's like, Google is forcing trans people to have dead names on their badges. How horrible. And I was like, yeah, that sounds kind of shitty. Well, like, let's look into it. Like, what does that mean? Like, is it like without a legal name change? It's like, well, yeah, they're saying they need legal name changes to have their name badges changed. Like, okay, well, I worked in some corporate environments before. Name badges are kind of important. It's like a security mechanism. Like, do you think that might be an important thing? And he's like, well, that's still wrong. And it's like, well, hold on, is it? And I'm like, so we finally bring up the story and we read it. And then we find out, one, it's not Google at all. It's a firm that they're subcontracting work to. And then two, we find out that the firm they're subcontracting work to was a security firm. And at that point, now I'm like, how did you get so mad at this and you didn't even know what happened? I don't understand where the outrage came from. You didn't know anything about the story. Something that you said earlier is very true about the moralizing of everything. And I don't know, you do know this, whether you've put word to it or not. People are moralizing every single thing. Even words are moralized, such that anytime you talk about a particular thing, you can no longer just convey a descriptive fact about something. That is impossible. Right. You're also conveying your normative feelings about it as well.
Right. It has to be evaluative too.
Always, yeah. And I always tell people this because I get invited sometimes to talk to colleges or whatever. One of the biggest pieces of advice I give when I'm talking to people is like, don't ever confuse the morality of a goal with the morality of a process, right? So when we're talking about like homelessness, 100%, eliminating 100%. Homelessness, that's a morally good thing. You should want to eliminate homelessness. That's really good. Nobody will argue with you there. But as soon as you start saying things like rent control, that's a morally good position. Well, hold on. No, it's not. That's a process. And insofar as it serves the end, it could be good, but it could also not be good. But people will start to get so tied into these processes that even when they don't work, or even when you can show that they don't work to serve the end, you're called out because now it seems like you disagree with the moral statement at the end rather than just the description of the system. Affirmative action is another really good one of this. I think racial justice in the United States is really important. And I think that there are steps that we can take to ameliorate like the differences in the races and educational attainment. Affirmative action doesn't seem like it's worked in a lot of different areas. There's a lot of issues with it. And the way that it gets reported is deceptive sometimes, right? I think in the UC schools, they would say, we tried affirmative action. We got 2x the enrollment of black students. And it's like, okay, but the graduation rate remained the same on an absolute value, but on the per capita thing, it actually reduced horribly. So you're getting people in school and it's not working. They're just failing out because they're not qualified for it. But as soon as you attack the concept of affirmative action in people's minds, you're attacking the concept of racial equity and racial justice. Like, well, hold on, no, I'm not. And you see this play out with every single issue, where if you try to have a conversation about a particular policy or a particular process, people are already at the end of the road where the moral claim is. And if you disagree with it any step of the way, you must disagree with the moral claim at the end.
Yeah, 100%. And so what I found the way to deal with that is to stick to the process, is to stick to the evaluation of the process. So this is where the conversation gets incredibly complicated. So the problem now that we have with this is we have a bunch of people running around who are telling us that the ways that we, either they're telling us that all processes are relative or that they're all equal, which by definition, they can't be both relative and equal. The other thing is, I found that if you focus on the process, so if you look at it as a syllogism, premise, conclusion, what we often find is that people run around and criticize other conclusions that people have based upon their own moral impulses. But we can get a lot farther if we talk about, is it valid? In other words, does the premise like affirmative action or rent control or what have you, is it a valid syllogism to say, if you do this and if you do this, it will yield this? And if it is, then, in other words, there are ways to think about or to conceptualize the problem that don't deal with conclusions, but just deal with processes. Because the fact of the matter is not all processes are equal. I mean, in fact, by definition, they can't be.
Yeah.
They can't be because so.
Even
So
trying to
how do
walk
we-
somebody through like that, even that part could be very challenging. Like, well, let's talk. Like, we're not even going to talk about the soundness of your argument. Let's just see syllogistically if it's valid. Does at least like the conclusion
Right.
follow? Assuming everything else is true, and sometimes even at that point, you're already like in another universe, depending on who you're talking to.
Right, and so I find, and this is maybe it's a little counterintuitive, but talking about whether something is true, I mean, ultimately that's of importance, but what's more important is that how do you know that it's true? That's why your epistemology is always more important than your metaphysics or anything else. Like, what is the process that you arrived at, and are you willing to change your mind? So that's the attitude, right?
Yeah.
And often people get stuck in conversations because they don't know, because they see exactly the opposite model for them. Everybody's screaming Nazis, alt-right, or, we're not, and this is made worse. The place where we should find this is just is where we're not finding it. We're not finding it in the university system, which is why I went on tour for the reverse Q&A in the university system. And by the way, the video that I think you did, you can see that's not being modeled for them, like the civil discourse, or they came down looking for a fight and they just weren't going to get a fight from me, which is just another. This is just parenthetical, but I just threw it out.
Well, even the are you referring to the real quick? Are you referring to the one where the people came down that were shouting at you?
Yeah, they were showing "fuck you."
Yeah, even at that, if they came down looking for a fight, at least that would be fun. But they didn't even come down looking for a fight. They just came down to kind of moralize, to preach at you, right? Like, it wasn't like you said these things about trans people, I want to fight with you about it. That'd be cool. Okay, go for it. But instead it was, you're evil, you're transphobic, you're causing harm by even asking the question. It's like, damn, if we're at the point where asking questions on a college campus is causing harm, we're pretty fucked. That's a pretty sad state of affairs. But yeah.
Okay, so you said a lot there. I don't know if you know this, but when you say stuff, there's a lot in there.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's always...
you're packing in with a lot of stuff. So part of the problem is that we have people, primarily academicians, who don't go by the traditional rules of engagement. So if you and I have disagreement, maybe one will come up or whatever, I can already tell you. I mean, if it would be a better example if you were here. I'm not going to punch you in the head. You're not going to punch me in the head. We're not going to disrupt each other. The goal is not to disrupt. The goal is to figure out what's true. And if you have people who are unwilling to have a conversation because they think there are embedded power dynamics and discourses, and that's the language that they use, then they've taken away a tool that we can use to figure out what's true. Right? And so the idea is, when you listen, they talk about disrupting. That's also why people don't answer direct questions, because they've never been trained in that way. They've never been trained to be clear thinkers. And when you're not trained that way, you have to make up, if you think that you have a good reason for what you believe, but it doesn't match with the evidence, then you have to make up that slack somehow. I'm offended, fuck you, you're a Nazi. I'm not, my friend Michael Shermer was going to debate. I think it was Frank Turek. I'm not sure. It was a while. It was before the pandemic. On it's like what you said before about some questions are not worth debating, but you're. I should say, and you're also correct that a significant number of people actually believe that they're worth debating. So almost by definition, they're worth debating because someone thinks they're worth debating. So why not have the best representative? And I certainly think Shermer is right up there with among the best representatives. And everybody was protesting that there shouldn't be a debate. Okay, so I'll just be clear one thing. I'm not a big fan of debates because that makes it less likely that people are willing to change their minds. I'm a much bigger fan of conversation. So these folks, they don't even want a conversation. They think, they call it privilege preserving epistemic pushback. There are a lot of, fancy academic names for these things. But the basic idea is that, what you said before, debating it is a kind of legitimacy to the idea. But they've got it exactly backwards. Not debating it makes people think that it's not worthy of debate, and then they become so convinced. But you can't really get to the truth unless you have, at the very least, know some reasons for why your beliefs could be wrong. And we have a culture right now in which that's frowned upon: discourse, dialogue, speech. And unfortunately, this is not exclusively coming from the left, but we see this in large organizational institutional captures. Rob Henderson, I was just with him at the University of Austin. He's also a founding faculty member. He calls this a luxury belief. And I think that's what it is. It's a luxury belief. So I don't know if this is okay. Before I go on to that tangent, so I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like, if when it comes to analyzing, I guess you'd say like the epistemology of a person, how you figure out if something is true or not. The epistemology, metaphysics, all of that actually doesn't matter. The only thing that matters are the moral claims at that point. Like to a lot of the people that you argue with. So if we have a conversation related to like LGBT stuff, or like the big one today is like the what is a woman? Well, like a trans woman is a woman.
Yeah.
Or how do you figure out who's trans? Well, if they say they are there. Okay, well, hold on. Isn't this like kind of confusing? What's confusing? That you fucking hate trans people? Well, no, hold on. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying like, well, maybe we should question this. Question what? How much you fucking hate trans people? It's like, no, what the fuck? I just want to have a conversation about any of these topics. Why? So you can tell me how much you fucking hate trans people? It's like, okay, well, fuck me.
Right.
It seems like everything, the whole, all of the lines of thought, and even some of the actual justification for certain beliefs are, we ought to believe this thing because it's morally good. That's why we ought to believe it. And it's like, well, hold on. How do you even justify that? Well, because like everything is arbitrary and anything can be anything. So we just should believe the things that are morally good. It's like, okay, well, by definition, like we're like in private language territory now. Like I don't even know what the fuck we're talking about anymore.
Right.
And it gets so frustrating because something that you said is the issue that we're having, and people keep viewing as like we're becoming more and more divided and we're becoming blah 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 blah. I think that's half true. I think what's actually happening is we're withdrawing into totally different epistemic universes.
Yeah,
and
that's
I think
correct.
That's what's actually happening. Yeah,
that's super dangerous as well.
Yeah, it is, because you'll have people. I don't know if you knew who Scott Alexander is. He does the Slate Star Codex blog or whatever. But he mentions an interesting thing that we live in a world of like matter and antimatter, where you can be living next to people, going to restaurants and everything, but it's like this. You don't even see these people in your life because they're in a totally different reality, and that's happening with our conversations as well. You can see it happen with the abortion stuff. I think abortion is good because my body, my choice. Oh well, I think abortion is bad because you're murdering a baby. You're not even having the same conversation. Like, if you believe you're murdering a baby, my body, my choice doesn't matter anymore. And if you think it's not a baby, then of course the woman's autonomy is the most important thing. Why would you say otherwise? But people can't even like engage anymore on the same level. It's like a dude's got a Game Boy and another guy's got like a PlayStation. They're trying to play the same game together. It's like not even remotely working. It's very, very, very frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah, or someone brings a chessboard on a football field.
Yeah, exactly.
A different category. So the examples that you gave before, so I'll throw in things that you may want to think about that could help the conversation. Instead of saying, you believe this or whatever, I mean, I don't have the transcript or what have you, what you said. I can't remember exactly what you said, but if you always end those things in a question, it's less threatening.
Of course,
and the idea is to decrease somebody's defensive posture. And we know that people change their beliefs and they change their minds in psychologically safe environments. And so one of the ways that we can do that is we can ask targeted questions. Ideally, they'd be targeted Socratic questions, but they can't be too Socratic because
people will have to. Especially because they know that I'm like a debater. If I start it's funny because one thing that you mentioned that's really successful is oftentimes if I'm having a conversation with somebody, I'm going to try to rephrase what you're saying so that you know that I understand it and so that we're on the same page. Because if I can't rephrase what you're saying, we're already fucked. But I'll notice sometimes that when I'm like, if I'm saying like, somebody says to me, I think 2 times 4 equals 8. And I'm like, okay, hold on. Let me just make sure I understand what you're saying. So you believe that like 4 times 2 equals 8. But because it's in the pretext of like a debate / conversation, they'll hear that and they'll be like, okay, well, hold on. Now, when I said that, and they're already disagreeing even at the rephrasal part. And I'm like, dude, I'm not even arguing with you. I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. Like, chill.
Right.
But yeah, people's minds will be so like poisoned against even like a rephrasal or like you said, like even a question that seems too aggressive. Yeah.
Okay, even that. So let's go back to that one. Instead of dude, I'm not even arguing with you, chill.
Yeah.
Here's what I would say. Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. Let me try to understand that.
Yeah.
Decreases the defensive posture, makes it more likely that someone's going to revise their beliefs. The Harvard negotiation project calls this a golden bridge. You want to kind of build in. And what I didn't talk about before is the rapport building techniques. You want to have ideally you'd have a kind of rapport before you jumped in. And
of course.
Rapport is more important the deeper the moral gulf.
I agree. Usually when I'm talking to people, I'll try to make sure that like, if the temperature is rising in a conversation, then the brain is shut down for disagreement, right? If it's at a point where anybody's like raising their voice, it's usually fucked. So I'll usually say like, okay, hey, hold on, let's chill. I understand you're saying this, like I understand that. And I try to find, usually my goal is, especially in moral disagreements, someplace I'll try to start is like, how many descriptive things can we align on, right? So somebody comes up and they say, I fucking hate women because they fuck over guys. And I'm like, okay, well, let's start in some place. Like we both
Do people
agree.
say stuff like that to you?
Dude, the internet's a wild place. Yeah, we argue with literal Nazis and communists and tankies and everything here, so we get all types here. On the internet, the conversations are crazy, but in the real world, they're getting crazy as well. You're seeing it on the because 5 or 6 years ago, people would argue when I was very left leaning. People would argue that like the schools are crazy, the kids won't ask any questions. Like that's bullshit or whatever. But now I think we're probably actually at that point where it does seem to be the case that a lot of this stuff isn't subject to debate anymore. People won't answer questions. But bringing the conversation temperature down a lot is a really big one. Trying to acknowledge like descriptive similarities, like, okay, we both agree this is a problem. I understand what you're saying there is important.
And you did that. I don't know if you were conscious of it or not, but you did that when you just consciously, you spoke in an easier tone too. And so it's called in literature, it's called pro-social modeling. You're kind of modeling the behavior positively for them. Yeah. You can do other things, before it gets to that point. I don't know if you want to go into this. What do you want? So tell me. Two things. I'm going to break the conversation and throw out a curveball. Why do you think so many people? I don't know if this happened on you. Did a lot of people tell you that you should talk to me?
Yeah.
Why do you? What do you think those people were looking for? What do you think they wanted us to talk about?
I think the perception is that you and me are occupying similar spaces right now that is exceedingly rare in discourse, where you're trying to bring people from two epistemically different worlds, and then using conversational and philosophical tools, and psychological tools to kind of get them together to at least be able to talk to each other. Because right now it feels like there is this incommensurability between left and right, where you don't exist in the same world. So just having a person that can bring this, and it seems like you're willing to do that based on the videos that we've watched, and hopefully people have the perception that I do that. So
okay. So I'll say, I'm completely new to this YouTube thing. I'm completely new. Like I was in the academic space and, the publishing and the peer review and then the
grievance studies and everything. Yeah, we've read all.
Yeah, the grievance studies. That's the one thing I didn't. I've talked about that so much, like I don't even want to talk about.
Yeah, somebody in my YouTube chat actually brought that up because some people are like, ask her, because everybody's always like, ask her that, and then somebody was like, he's talked about this so much on his show. I bet he never wants to talk about it again.
I have talked about this for 3 years. Like constantly talked about it. But yeah, I'm trying to. I really struggle sometimes with the best way to do this, and I'm starting to think right now that YouTube is the way to do this. You can reach people, and the other thing Twitter.
Wait, before you go on, when you say do this, what are you referring to specifically? Like your political project or? What is this?
No, it's actually an apolitical project. That free speech and open inquiry are not. They're not on the right. They're not on the left. I mean, I guess you could call them American values. Not even. They're just broadly Enlightenment values or Western liberalism. I guess you could say that. Although that's kind of a problem, a tainted term. To just help people start talking to each other again, to help people start communicating across divides. I can't even possibly tell you the number of emails I get. Oh, what should I do? I have a friend, they believe this, I believe this. I think it was Peterson who told me YouTube is like the new Gutenberg press. There are just so many, but I don't know how to harness that yet. I'm learning that now, and I guess Twitter is just a fucking sewer. It's my one of my writing partners, my primary writing partner, said it's like a sewer that follows you. And so I do read comments, but I don't read a lot of the comments. But I've been stunned by how positive the YouTube comments were. I think it's because I've been living in the Twitter sphere for so long.
That's the absolute lowest form of all of human discourse is what happens.
Oh, it's just
on Twitter.
It's truly. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. I think it was Trump in one of the debates said, could be some 400-pound guy in his basement, right? I mean, and then people have sock puppet accounts. People have, there is getting back to what you said before, I find to be a fundamental difference between talking to people online and talking to people in person. People will say things to you online that they would never say to your face.
Yeah, it's actually so true. If this is like I come from the gaming world. That was my background. And you'll find people you'll find a person in real life and they're like, oh my God, it's Destiny. And I'm like, yeah, what's up? Who are you? And it's like, you might not remember me, but I'm like Sockman 79. And I'm like, wait a second, you You're the one that told me that you wanted to face fuck me until I gagged to death on your cock and died, and that you would rape my corpse. And he's like, oh yeah, dude, but I just said that shit online. I was just messing around, man. Like, nice to meet you. And I'm like, what the fuck? You will find people that will do that all the time.
That's crazy, huh?
And I'm like, Jesus Christ,
crazy.
you know? And when you're getting like 1 million of those comments, it's hard to tell. Like, I don't even know who's serious or who's fucking around or who's just like a little bit more extra because they're online versus in real life. And it's like, okay, geez.
Yeah. And then they get, I think Twitter rewards that
hyperbolic, bombastic, toxic,
with the likes, with the thumbs up, the hearts, whatever. And I think that it's also that people plug into these pre-existing communities of virtue signaling, although that's an overused term. That you want, it's kind of a tribalism. Oh, this guy's bad, he's a Nazi, he said something we don't like. And that's the other thing that I find, I don't know, disheartening is a word I used to use 5 years ago, and like 3 years ago I would probably say annoying, but now I'm like, okay, whatever. Is when people, so here's the moral infrastructure for this. So remember, you have people who will tell you to do the work, but almost as a rule, these people themselves have not done the intellectual work to figure out what the arguments against their positions are. That's why every time I meet someone who does gender studies, I say, in any of your classes, have you ever read Martha Nussbaum's criticism of Judith Butler? And I've never heard a single person in all the years I've been asking that question say yes. The idea is that when you don't value dialogue, argumentation, actual critical analysis, not critical theory, we can just leave out the critical or analysis, and you're really in these self-possessed echo chambers, you don't develop an opportunity to explore counters to your own beliefs. And the consequence of that is that you become you're held hostage. That's why there are only two ways. Jonathan Rush's Kindly Inquisitors talks about the narrative. His last book was The Constitution of Knowledge, which is great too, and his street epistemology. There's a way of asking these facilitated questions broadly based in the Socratic method. And just to be clear, I coined it, I invented it, I do it, but I am by far not the best person who does this. Like I'm good at it. I hope somewhat. But there are people who are so much better at this than me. The best guy, be interesting guest for your show, is Anthony Magnabosco. He's truly taken this to a whole new level. And there are people who go out and do this. But anyway, I think that the larger point there is we know that there are tools to help people value certain things, value belief revision, value sincerity and honesty and authenticity. We know that this can be done. The question is, how do we move society in that direction, especially when our organizations and institutions have been captured by ideologues who have, in the academic sphere, who have jobs for life?
Yeah. I feel like I write down things as you mention them so I don't forget them. The first thing you mention is like, every time somebody does do the work, I hear this. So on the left, it's always, when I argue with somebody, anything about the United States or Russia or anything else, people always say, you need to read history. And lo and behold, every single time I investigate any historical claim, I'll come back and I'll be like, you're even more wrong than I thought you were. Okay, because holy shit. Or on the right, it'll usually be like, the phrase I hear all the time is like, I do my own research. And I'm like, that's really good if you do your own research. Why don't you share some with me? And it's like, well, here's a clip of Joe Rogan. Here's a clip of Tim Pool. Okay, so you haven't done any fucking research. You're just getting your information from an alternative media source instead. You're not actually doing your own research. People will always use those phrases like, do the work, do your own research, but they never do. It's just like a stand-in for, I've gotten my information from some other place, and I'm going to pretend that I did the work. Yeah.
Here's a question you can ask somebody if they say, read your history. This is the question I ask. I talk about this in How to Have Impossible Conversations. Oh, that's really interesting. So always a positive comment before, or usually a positive comment. Can you give me the names of 3 historians you disagree with? Most people won't be able to do that.
Sure. Yeah. Right? I can imagine it.
And then what I like to do is I use this. My buddy John W. Loftus has this genius idea. It has a pedigree in the literature. But fucking genius idea. It's called the outsider test. And the outsider test is basically the idea that you would. So the Christian doesn't think it's odd that Jesus walks on water. The Pentecostal doesn't think it odd that people speak in tongues. Most Muslims don't think it odd. You'd find some claim, or if you don't, Buddhists, the Dalai Lama reincarnating through all bodies. So you want to look at that as if an outsider would look at that. So if you say, someone says to you, oh, read your history, and you say, well, give me, that's really interesting. Well, thanks. I think I should do that. Can you give me the names of 3 historians who have disagreed with your position? And usually they'll obfuscate instead of saying no. And so you just repeat the question, or we do what we talked about before. Well, why don't you ask me that question?
Sure.
And then what you can do is you would use a version of the outsider test. You would say, would you find it at all disconcerting if somebody on the other side said that I should read my history, and I asked them for the names of 3 historians and they couldn't give me one? So it takes it off of them, and it makes it more likely, not in this case that they would revise their beliefs, but they would be more likely to go into a state of wonder or a state of thinking.
You like the goal is always,
because it's not defensive, right? Because they won't adopt a defensive posture in that sense.
Yeah, I always say that, like, especially when I'm arguing with somebody that's really ideologically opposed to me, my goal is, I'm so far away from changing their mind, and my goal is never to change their mind. My goal is that hopefully when they go away from the conversation, I've like planted the seeds of doubt, or at least they have a few questions, or at least they're unhappy.
The gift of doubt.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
They're unhappy with their position. Like, at the very least, I want them to walk away saying, like, I think I could have defended that better, or I need to do more reading because I didn't understand. I wasn't able to defend this. Like, that's my only goal, basically, and hopefully that kind of like sets them in a better direction.
Yeah, and you can also ask in that sense, do you think it's a good thing for people to doubt?
Sure. Well, yeah, that would be. I can imagine some questions because some people are going to do the moralizing thing where, like, doubt what, that these people deserve rights, and then you get. But it's going to depend on the combatant level the combatant level of what you're dealing with.
Yeah. So then you build like an architectonic frame, right? You say, well, like, is it a good thing to doubt? And you say something that just seems so reasonable, and then you just slowly build it up.
Yeah,
but again, it depends on the person with whom you're talking to.
Here's another huge issue. Ties into something I said, and then something you just said. You mentioned 2 things. We have a hard time exploring counters to our own beliefs in schools. And then you said that it's good to give people the tools to value, like, belief revisionism, sincerity, honesty, authenticity. Something that I mentioned earlier is, I think politics is very deceptive, because I don't think that when I think of politics, like, what is it truly? I think that politics is it's kind of a power grab. It's an exercise of political will to influence, like, legislation or political processes. When I think of, like, politics, that's what I think of. But that's not really what anybody's talking about when we talk about politics on the internet. Politics is more kind of like you could say that it's like a form of, like, hobbyism. Like, people kind of follow it, like sports teams and everything. One of the issues when you talk about, like, we can give people the tools to value, like, belief revisionism, honesty, sincerity, those are all things that I think people kind of pay lip service to, but there aren't any rewards for those things. Especially when the institutions
I totally disagree.
You disagree?
I completely disagree.
That's great. Okay, so
possibly disagree more.
Sure. So I'll give you the opportunity to clarify my position. I think personally they're good virtuously. I would aspire to these things. But if let's say that I'm going to a school and I want to talk to a person who's at this school and they're in an incredibly insulated circle. And let's say that I'm able to give them the tools of, like, self-doubt, sincerity, honesty, or whatever. If they start to exercise these things, the reward is going to be almost instantaneous expulsion from all the social groups they're in.
Okay. I misunderstood what you said. Okay, now I agree with you. So
there's no reward societally for having that honesty and willingness to engage. There's only drawbacks.
Right. Totally. Not only so I interpreted it as no rewards in terms of an absolute.
Virtue-wise, there are absolutely rewards.
Yeah. Right. Well, what I hear you saying is that there are no external rewards. In fact, I would actually go beyond that and say there are external punishments.
Punishments, of course.
Particularly if you articulate something that doesn't comport with the moral orthodoxy.
Yes.
I was interpreting that internal. Nothing could be better than shedding delusion or false belief. But even beyond that, Aristotle talks about having relationships and friendships. Like, we all need, and I do think that this is a human universal. We all need to have the feeling that we want to be heard. We all need people who love us in genuine relationships, people who we think know us. And the only way you can do that is if you're honest with someone in an authentic relationship. But when we create communities in which everybody has to have a certain belief, or at least give lip service to a certain belief, nobody knows what anybody else means. I don't know what you mean. You don't know. So you can never develop genuine relationships. Of course, it's actually worse than that, because you don't even know what you mean after a while. But
That's something I just did a huge thing about trans. There's a bunch of trans issues on my stream, and one of these things I read off because I get emails from a lot of trans people that talk about the things that I talk about, the positions I have. And one of the most reoccurring things that was so unfortunate is that they felt like in a lot of their groups at like schools and sometimes even at work or other social groups that they're afraid to say anything because they don't know. Like one person, I don't think I included their email when I read this, but one person emailed me where sometimes they have this awkward exchange where you're kind of saying things to another person and you're kind of testing each other to see what you actually believe because you know what you're supposed to say. And it feels very 1984-ish where you have like the campuses like, do you believe that, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually you're kind of like, okay, we're on the same page of this. But you have to be so careful treading water on your way there. So it's...
Okay, so let's linger on that for a second. This is important. So it's good being 55, man. It's good being 55. I tell you, I do feel that I'm in a situation now where that I wasn't even when I was 45 that I can perhaps offer, guidance might be too strong, but suggestions to people who are younger that you won't learn from the mistakes that I made in my life. But you'll find when you speak candidly and bluntly with people, you may or you probably will lose relationships, but those are relationships that weren't worth having, right? You'll find that if you are willing to change your mind in a conversation with someone, if you really want to develop authentic relationships with people and you really want to develop to be loved and to love other people, you have to be honest with them, and you have to you can't walk on eggshells around them, right? You can't be in a position in your life, oh, I wonder if I should say this, or no, just say it, be blunt and be forthright. And as long as you're not, if you want a rule, as long as you're not targeting an immutable characteristic of a person, you're fine, you're good to go. And if someone doesn't accept that, then they're not worthy to be in your life, right? Then they're just a dead weight. Worse than a dead weight.
I would agree with you. I have to be careful sometimes when I give advice because I have to tailor it to the people that listen to me. I would agree with you from my personal life. I think the only issue you get is the social groups that some people are in make this almost prohibitively hard. So for me personally, I'm a very big atheist. I'm fine with religious people. I don't care at this point in my life, but I used to be more anti-theist, but I'm a big atheist. I'm not religious. And I might have said something when I was in my early 20s. I might say like, if you don't believe in God or Muhammad or whatever, like you should say it. Like you don't live a life as a lie. But like now I'm a little bit older and I reflect and it's like, that's easy for me to say because I'm not going to get disowned by my whole family if I profess a certain belief. My parents are strong Catholics, but like they don't hate me because I'm atheist. So sometimes I wonder, like I believe in what you're saying. There are a lot of friends that I've lost. People call me a bridge burner. There's a lot of things that happen. But the friends that I do have, I don't have to think about why you're my friend. I don't have to think if it's because we share some social bubble because where the fuck I stand on everything.
And let me ask you a question. So my guess is that the relationships you have, your friends can tell you something and I don't think they'll do it online or publicly if they disagree with you, and you'll listen to them.
Yeah, the goal, I hope what I've been told or whatever is that I'm a very non-judgmental person to talk to. You can share experiences and release with me. You don't have to feel like I'm going to jump down your throat over something or have like a big like moral condemnation immediately after you utter something to me. Yeah. Right.
And my guess is that most people will want to have those kinds of relationships.
Hopefully, yeah.
And that my guess is that there is a way to do that. Now, what you said is correct. If you're in Pakistan or something and you're an atheist, you have to pay attention to context to a large extent. And I'm talking not about relationships of obligation. I'm talking about relationships of choice. Like in your work life, there are things that you should do that you ought not to do in your personal life. You don't talk about your sex life at work, for example. Sure. Probably shouldn't, maybe if some odd context like the adult film industry or something. But as a general rule, there are certain subjects that are best avoided, but that's very different in one's personal life. And I think in this cultural madness, we've really lost a focus on bringing it back to what matters, family, friendships, life. I held both of my parents' hands at their death. I mean, does it matter if you have a close relationship to someone that have a different political opinion? I mean, that's completely insane to me.
Yeah, it's weird on that because like people keep saying things like society's becoming more and more divided. But I think that's the one way of looking at it. But I think the actual bigger issue is I think society is actually becoming unbelievably homogenous just in different areas. Because when we think about societies being divided, you think of like people disagreeing with each other all the time, blah, 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 blah. But I don't see that happening as the big problem. I think having a divided society in opinion is fine. The issue is that all of the different things are being pulled into kind of their own bubbles, and those bubbles are unimaginably homogenous, to where if I go to a certain area and there are like gun-toting, redneck, Trump-loving people, there is going to be an unbelievable homogeneity of opinion there. And then if I go over to another area, people are withdrawing and selecting more and more and more for political beliefs. Whereas maybe even 10 years ago, it might be enough to just say if you're like a Democrat or Republican maybe, or it might be enough to say whatever. Now it's like on every single opinion. What's your opinion on Leah Thomas? What's your opinion on Roe v. Wade? What's your opinion on this and that? And if you disagree on anything, you're just out. And the beliefs, the belief systems of these like bubbles are becoming more and more self-reinforced, and they're selecting from more and more political opinions, and they're becoming more and more homogenous. I think that's the issue.
And there are even layers on top of that when you include intersectionality and looking at people on the basis of immutable characteristics. Mm-hmm. My response to somebody for that would be, why can't you let me be wrong? Mm-hmm. It's a simple question. And by the way, when you ask these questions, it's always a good thing to not jump in and respond. Why can't you let me be wrong? Mm-hmm. You don't say anything. Are those your dogs or are they mine?
Dog? Is there somebody barking?
Oh, I think they're my dogs upstairs.
Yeah, probably. I don't have dogs, so I hope.
Pathological hatred of the mailman.
Sure. Oh, gotcha. It's funny because I know all these terms so well because I used to be like very, very, very left. I still am very, very left, but I would use these. There's like there are these combinations of different understandings of things that just come together in the most absurd way. So like the concept of the concept of like institutional oppression combined with the concept of punching up versus punching down, combined with like this idea of like finding people that are evil. Like you can build out this whole kind of like left-leaning infrastructure to where depending on your intersectional placement, you can like infinitely attack and destroy and bully, certain groups of certain people. But like if anybody says anything back, they're instantly the worst type of like transphobe, homophobe, classist, ableist, or whatever. And there's a weird thing online that happens, and it's probably getting more and more to the real world, where like certain people are essentially beyond reproach just because of where they sit at in this kind of like intersectional category. But they can be like the most vicious, vindictive, toxic, vitriolic people in the world. And you're like, Jesus.
They have pronouns in their bios.
Yeah, well, yeah, or sometimes even more than that. Yeah, but it's incredibly frustrating. Yeah, because they'll start hitting you on things that you said something earlier that used to be true, but it's not true anymore. And it used to be you don't touch immutable characteristics. But now you can take like this weird intersectional approach where you can touch immutable characteristics as long as you're below them on kind of like the oppression hierarchy. So I mentioned before, Pete Buttigieg is one that gets relentlessly attacked, not for being a politician, not for being center left, but for being gay. People attack him for being gay, but it's because he's white and wealthy. So now the gay part is okay because intersectionally he sits higher than somebody that might be like poor and black or poor and trans or something, right? And it's a wild world. People attack me. I used to debate Nazis. That's where I got famous, was debating Nazis and far-right people on the internet. And I didn't learn until I started debating lefties that there were racial slurs for me, that Gusano is apparently a slur for descendants of Cubans that like aren't super left-wing. I didn't even know that.
Really?
Yeah, but it's a wild, wild, wild world out there. Jeez.
Yeah, and Daryl Davis said, a few years ago, he was called many things, but he never thought he'd be called a white supremacist. Daryl Davis.
Yeah, the guy converts Nazis, gets them to give up.
Yeah, the black guy who actually, you talk about big balls on someone, like, holy shit, dude, those are the biggest balls anyone could possibly have. He goes into the black guy who goes into KKK, literally physically goes into KKK rallies. That's... you really need to let that percolate in a second to really think how unbelievable the amount of courage that takes is just beyond the pale. But I do think that that's part of the problem, and the problem there would be that we're told who we can and cannot speak to, what we can, and there's a kind of guilt or taint by association. It's a big problem, and I'm not entirely sure how. Hopefully, it's a phase and that we'll get over it.
That's my issue along this thing is at this point, because the issue isn't even so much that problem. It's that today, like historically, because of the internet, we have so many reward systems built in for it that it starts to feel intractable.
Yeah,
that,
that's true.
The
That's right.
joke is always that, like, 20 years ago, even if you grew up and you really wanted to fuck toasters, that's going to be gone pretty quick because everybody's going to look at you like a crazy toaster fucker. But nowadays, if I grew up and I want to fuck toasters, I can probably find an online support group with 50,000 members that are telling me like the best brand of toaster to buy to fuck. And it's like a totally different world that when you're in that place where anybody has all these online tools to perfectly sort themselves into these perfect bubbles and then become self-referential, and the reward systems are there and the punishment systems are like exculpatory if anybody thinks differently. It's like, fuck. Like, I don't know how to break that. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish when you said fuck toasters, I'm a science fiction fanatic, and I just went down the hole of Babylon of the Cylons, Battlestar Galactica. But I didn't
watch. Are these people that fuck toasters?
Really?
Or
Oh my God, you should. The slang for Cylon, which is like these human. Almost in every characteristic looking, they call them toasters because they're.
Gotcha. Okay.
But no, I think that's true, and I think one of the things that we see happen now is we see institutions and organizations that really celebrate and laud their dysfunction. It's not merely a kind of ideological capture of the institution. Is that people who have, this is my speculation about it, it's that people who have, they're like right below the threshold for a mental disorder, get together with other people, and in general we see commonalities and characteristics among these people, and then they, instead of taking any form of responsibility, or instead of kind of having, again, doing the actual work, the intellectual work, they'll attack the system, right? They'll say that any disparity of outcome is a product of the system, as opposed to, I'm just thinking like Asians in, that actually is an example of institutional racism, structural systemic racism is the term. Asians in Ivy League schools, Asians in Harvard have different requirements. So they'll look to something in the system as opposed to something in themselves, or something. I don't think. Look, this is complicated, but let me ask you a question. How many hours a day do you work? And I understand some people wouldn't consider what you do work. I consider it work. How many hours a day do you work?
I work way too much. It's
okay.
Anywhere from 10 to 14 hours a day, but I enjoy it. I love it. I like being in this world, doing emails, online stuff. Yeah, it's fun for me.
Okay, so I'm the same way.
Okay.
And so I think a lot of people don't understand what it takes to be successful. And I'm not saying I'm successful, or I'm not. I'm just saying it takes so much work to do that. And many people, there's an attitude among people, I should be here. I should be kind of higher in the pecking order. I should be. And when that doesn't manifest for them, it's very easy to both blame the system or to plug into a community of other people who also blame the system. Now that, just to be crystal clear about something, that is not an excuse to give people in different zip codes. This is what the right has wrong. The right is incorrect about this idea that people can just pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, right? If they could do that, they would have already done that.
Yeah, of course.
Every American has a right to a public education of the first rate. That's one of my core beliefs. But I do think that we need to be more thoughtful about how we engage this orthodoxy that came about. It was like a blitzkrieg without a war. It's everywhere now. Helen Pluck-Rose calls it the critical social justice, or how we engage. Some people who the term has fallen out of vogue, but woke people. I believe that in the one of the problems that are inherent in that is that they demean and devalue and attack people who want to have conversations. That is a core problem. And then they remove the tools of analysis. They take away the tools of analysis like scientific rigor, empiricism, et cetera, double-blind placebos, and they switch to lived experience.
Yeah.
And so it's not only that the universities, this is called standpoint epistemology. It's not only that the universities have this. I'm doing a show. I don't know, can you see the posters on the back?
Something I stopped donating to NPR, and then all
things reconsidered. Yeah. I'm doing a show about NPR in which I used to listen to NPR every time I got in my car. Like I used to donate to NPR. I used to love NPR, and it became increasingly more insane. And what the Republicans want is to defund NPR. They've been trying to do this for I don't even know how long they've been trying to do this. I don't want NPR to be defunded. I don't. I want NPR to be a station that pushes back on guests, asks hard questions. I've been listening to so much NPR for the show; it's crazy. And to just as an aside, one of the things that I've learned from listening to countless episodes of NPR right now is that when they want to have somebody on, like say they're doing a topic, you mentioned a trans thing, or I just did an analysis of an episode where they're talking about fat activism and fat phobia and et cetera. They ask somebody who believes in, like, a fat activist what somebody on the other side would say, as opposed to having a doctor or someone and actually on the other side. But the point is that we see this manifest in the cultural means of production, particularly in journalism right now. And NPR is really where CNN's bad. Fox has its own set of problems that are on the other side of the aisle. But one of the things that's so disturbing to me about this is that when we see federally funded places like NPR, I think we need something where people can trust a journalism where people ask hard questions, where they have ideological diversity. Like that's a kind of glue that binds us. But we don't have that. So not only are we polarizing ourselves in terms of our academic institutions, which have left-wing capture. We can talk about the Supreme Court and some branches of the government, which have right-wing capture, although that's a little different. But I also see this happening in news, media, and entertainment. Netflix would be a great example of that. The new Doctor Who show is just truly terrible.
Haven't watched that.
Star Trek Discovery was terrible. Oh, you know what I've been watching that's just fucking awesome? The Old Man.
Never heard of it.
Oh, it's on Hulu. And then the guy who did Nathan For You. You ever watch that?
Yes, I have watched that.
Oh, genius show. Genius. He has another show on, can't remember the name, but he has another show on HBO that they just have one episode so far. It is phenomenal. Phenomenal.
I usually don't have time to watch full shows, but I'll probably check out the next one just because the rehearsal, just because Nathan is such a fucking amazingly hilarious guy.
Yeah, amazing, hilarious. Really, the next level show. I shouldn't do this, but I answer my emails while I'm watching TV. It's a terrible habit, but I'm lost in this insane email flood.
The something you mentioned is so I see there'll be like a macro scale, like it happens socially, and then on a micro scale it happens to me. Have you ever heard of the concept of like a simulacrum?
Yes.
I noticed that when it comes to debate, and it's funny because oh my god, the old host of the Daily Show, Jon Stewart. When Stewart went on Crossfire, he kind of called out the same thing. This idea that like when you guys debate, it's not real. It's kind of like staged. When people engage with the other side, I'll notice that they're never engaging with the other side. So here's like a personal example that will happen to me. When people argue against things that I've done, they're literally fighting against simulacrums. So what'll happen is somebody will say, "Do you remember Destiny did this thing," or "he said this thing," and it'll be a horrendous misquote. It won't even be remotely true. And then people will take that, distort it, and then whenever in the future they refer back to like, "Oh, well, we know that Destiny's crazy because he hates rape victims and trans people because he said that or that," what they're referring back to is like their original misrepresentation of what I said. And I had a whole thing recently I went through and I kind of demonstrated this process from like step 1, 2, 3, 4, how this works. But it comes to a point to where like, okay, going all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, we never just say this, but there were two things that I try to do in my mind to keep myself from being captured completely by one ideology. The first is always asking myself, even when I feel really strong about it, what would it take to change my mind on a thing? But the second thing that I think is equally important is you should be able to argue the opposite side of an issue, and not like bullshit, but convincingly. So when I'm having a debate about any topic, most of the time I can argue the other end better than the person I'm arguing, just because I've thought about it so much, I've had so many arguments about it. But oftentimes when people are trying to summarize the opponent of or the arguments of an opponent for any given like ideological thing or any given policy or whatever, the summary will be ridiculous. You can talk to like a pro-life person, like, "Hey, what do you think pro-choice people believe?" "I think that they just want to fucking kill babies." Really?
Right.
Do you really think that's fair? Or like, what do people that want to like mandate vaccines? What do they believe?
100%.
They want to control my body and put whatever poison they want. They just want Bill Gates to treat me. It's like, come on, dude. You don't even know what the fuck they believe. So I don't even know what you are. I know what you believe. If you don't know what they believe, I don't know if you know what you believe.
Yeah, that's really important. So John Stuart Mill talks about that. It's really important to have, in an educational context, people who believe the argument. So I'm an atheist as well. I've been accused of being a militant atheist. I don't think I'm a militant atheist. My definition of atheism, by the way, is I do not believe there's sufficient evidence to warrant belief in God, but if I would be shown the evidence, I would change my mind. So I taught an atheism class, and I would have people come in, lots of people come in, a science and pseudoscience class. I had Phil Vischer from VeggieTales come in. He became a friend of mine. I had Phil Smith from George Fox come in to give a lecture about his best arguments for the existence of God. I didn't say anything. He actually wrote a nice op-ed in the Oregonian when I retired. I've had Mark Sargent from the Flat Earth Society come in and talk about why he believes the Earth is flat. I've had Nick Pope come in and talk about alien abductions. I have a great guest for your show after this, by the way.
Oh boy.
I think what you've said is important. I do think it's limited. If you don't believe it, then it's difficult to present the best arguments. I know, and I say that not only anecdotally, there's actually a paper about that. I can't remember. I can try to find it if you want. But I think that there is something about having people argue the other side, or at least knowing the arguments enough. And that's why I just find it so, I don't know, just so disappointing when I listen to like NPR, something I used to love, and they don't have an actual expert. They have somebody else giving a caricature of a position that literally nobody believes.
Yeah.
And I actually,
or it'll be like the 1%. It'll be the most ridiculous person on that side.
Yeah,
it's
a character.
Yeah,
and I had stopped myself from articulating a thought that I had before, because what you were saying, I got lost in the conversation, was really interesting to me. But one thing I find is that people they'll say that you said an argument or made it that you simply didn't make, and then they'll attack that and just exactly what you said. That will get repeated over and over and over and over and over and over again. And you never say, and then, it's like 1,000 repetitions equals the truth. The next thing you know, you hate trans people. I hate trans people. Just for the record, I have 2 kids. They're both gay. I have a daughter who's adopted from China. And then I hear Boghossian hates Chinese people. Really? Boghossian hates gay people. Really? So I just think that it gets back to the point. You just have to figure out whose voices you shouldn't listen to. And the answer to that question is, well, most people, right? I mean, you have to figure out who's, like, when someone's telling you, what was the thing that you said? Oh yeah, read your history. Right? I've taken notes too about taking notes. When someone said, read your history, to what extent do we, and they go to popular cultural commentators, and to what extent do we take that seriously, and how much time do we want to spend in those conversations? And that's also why I recommended at the beginning of our conversation that the scale is so important to use. I know the older I get, the more I realize that once I understand the argument, that there is one, like if there were, and this is going to be a weird thing to say, but I'll say it. But if there really were an advanced species, if they were kind of like, how would gods talk? It's the title of my next book, something like that. Like the way gods, they would really have to talk in questions, Socratic questions. But I think they'd have to have a specific format, like understand the claim, scale, defeasibility question. I found that putting that defeasibility question right after scales, like, oh, how much do you believe that? And if someone says 10, I'm 10 on a 1 to 10. Then you need to think about, well, geez, do I really want to spend this time? Do I really want to? Do I really want to talk about this with people? I mean, I know a guy, friends of mine, they love it when people say 10. But I want to say, I want to leave a message to people. Say, I don't think people, if they're listening to this conversation and they're being disheartened, that you're misquoted, or that, people are calling you a Nazi or whatever. I think that this is a cultural fad. So we all suffer from this kind of moral myopia, and we think that, like a cultural myopia, like what's happening now with this moral trend.
Always the worst right now.
It's that's not true. When I grew up, we used to have exercises. I'm be 56 in a couple of days. We used to have exercises where we, as if it would do anything, prepared for a nuclear attack from the Soviets. Like every generation, we just have crazy shit to deal with. But I do think that this is, I don't know the expiration date of the ideology, but I don't think it's capable of sustaining itself. It doesn't have an apologetic. In other words, it doesn't have a built-in defense of itself. In fact, it has quite the opposite, where people, that's why I mentioned Martha Nussbaum's criticism of Judith Butler. It has it built in so that people don't even know the other side of the argument, because knowing so would be a form of power domination, oppression, etc. And I also think it's just too fucking stupid. That's the other thing. What are they offering us? Are they offering us Chaz zones? Are they? What are they?
Well, for some people, the offer is actually very attractive, but it depends on what. It depends on how you want to go. Like, so for instance, like I am kind of I am white and I'm a guy, and that kind of sucks. But if I join certain groups, maybe I could be like non-binary, neurodivergent. So in some instances, depending on who you are, especially if you're going to college, you kind of get like a
community.
You get like victim buy-in to some things. Yeah, that I was traumatized because I was treated like a neurodivergent person because they didn't recognize it. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say they get sneaky fucker status, from evolutionary biology.
Oh, sure. But that's less interesting to me. That's a thing you can explore. So here's something that worries me, and I guess I'm still relatively young in the grand scale of things.
How old are you?
33.
Dude, fuck 33. I wish, can I pause you right there?
Go for it.
Can I tell you what I wish I knew at 33?
Go for it. Tell me.
I wish I knew the following things at 33.
Okay.
I was just thinking about this the other day. I wish I knew that when I squatted, my knees should be in front of my toes.
Oh, I've got that. We started our gym arc a year ago, so yeah, knees in front of toes always. So knees over toes. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I just wish I would have saved me a knee surgery and insane damage to my knees.
Gotcha.
I wish I knew how bad sugars truly were for you.
Okay. Gary
Taub has some interesting stuff on that. I wish I knew that, like, a lot of the things are health and diet related. I wish I knew that how important sleep hygiene is, and to not like drink as much alcohol as I've been drinking.
Sure.
I really love drinking and eating. So I love being in Hungary. It's like, why the fuck am I going to pay for a $14, $15, $16 cocktail here when I live in Budapest and the cocktails are $2.50? Dude, Budapest is like the best place ever if you want to drink and eat for a reasonable, hyper reasonable sum of money. But yeah, I guess if I were 33, I would also say to myself, you have to make a decision about what kind of life you want to lead. And you have to make a decision about what kind of friends you want to have.
For sure.
And
you can't have one foot in both worlds all the time, because it ends up. Yeah,
that's right. The more open, authentic you are with your relationships, the better you'll be. And don't maintain a friendship with someone for a long time because you've known them for a long time, right? My friend Matt Thornton, who's also my jiu-jitsu teacher, has just amazing ability that I've learned from him to just cut people completely out of his life. He just cuts toxic people out of his life. And once I've started this my life has been so much happier and so much better. Your friends should want you to be happy, and they should want you to they should just be your friends,
Yeah, I agree with most of those for sure. I still like sugar.
Anyway,
but,
you said the 33, and I said, oh geez.
No, yeah, you're good. Now the truly amazing thing, I always say this on stream, the truly amazing thing is, I could have conveyed everything I know now to me at 18. But the worst thing, I've always said this growing up, the worst thing that I know about myself is that if I could step into a time machine and go back and talk to me at 18, even if I knew it was me from the future, I know that's, oh my God, that's actually me from the future. I could impart all of the wisdom and advice I've acquired in the last 15 years. And at 18, I would ignore every fucking thing, because I would think I turned into fucking kids, man.
That's a problem.
But regardless of that, something I was going to mention, I mentioned that I'm only 33, so I've only lived through like so many eras, or one or two eras, 2007 and after, and then 90s cartoons and shit, I don't know. I know that it's easy to fall into kind of a recentism bias, kind of, where everything recently is the worst thing ever, and this is the worst period, and people have been saying it. I think in the 1800s, people were saying it's the worst history, or the worst era of all of U.S. history. The thing that kind of scares me right now is there are there are two parts of it that make me wonder. And I won't know, I guess, for 10 or 20 years because we see how these people grow up and then we'll see what happens to them, right? Like, is it a fucking stupid ideology that people grow out of? Is that one, I hate to hit on the trans issue so much because I'm a very pro-trans person. Yeah, but I hate to hit on these so much. But one is that so much is wrapped up in this kind of intersectional, sometimes trans identity that I think it makes it uniquely hard to attack the youth today than it used to be growing up. Like when I was growing up, it was not uncommon for people to say like, you're having a phase in college, and you should, you're a fucking idiot when you're a kid. And that's great. I support that. I support people being fucking stupid from 18 to 23. You should be. If you're totally saying you don't change at all through college, I think something's wrong with you. You should be read Ayn Rand, be anti-war, pacifist, communist, whatever, like explode those ideologies. But you used to be able to say as an adult, like, okay, they're kids, they're being dumb, they'll grow out of it, it happens. But now, because it's wrapped up in so many types of identities, there's this like impermeability or this unassailableness of their identities that is unique. Yeah. Now when someone is being 21 and they've identified as like autism, gender, and they go by Z's or pronouns or whatever, I can no longer say like they're dumb and they'll grow out of it because that's actually like a mortal fucking sin. And it feels a lot different. That's one thing. And then a second thing that rides on the back of that, like one book stacked on the other, is it sounds bad. I sound so old and grumpy. Kids are way too important today. Social media has mindfucked people. If you wanted to have a national or international message when you were like 17, 18, 19, holy fuck, you better be like a fucking Olympic athlete or do some crazy shit, run into a burning building and save like 7 kids and their dog. Whereas nowadays, like anybody can have a viral tweet, a viral TikTok, or whatever. So yeah, I feel like there is, and hopefully I'm wrong, but I feel like right now historically there's a unique combination of identities that are unassailable combined with an ability for children to have more importance and self-importance than they ever have because of like social media. And those two things make me worry because if, like I've always said this, if I would have started streaming at 18, holy fuck, I don't know how stupid I would have been. Because if I would have gotten that much validation and reinforcement from all the stupid shit I thought as a teenager, I might have stayed like that my whole life. And that's something that worries me. Yeah.
Okay, so we're in agreement. And so the conversation, first of all, thanks for letting me take all these tangents in our conversation.
No problem, you're good.
It's been fun for me. So I want to talk about that identity thing, your number one thing. And so I think whenever I hear something, I often think in terms of interventions. Like, how can we intervene in the culture? How can we intervene in people's cognitive processes? How can we intervene to make some kind of a change? So I want to share with you a question I've come up with, or a suite of questions I've come up with for identities. So I've been thinking about this thought experiment of the magic wand. And the magic wand, people say, so I'm gonna give you a wand. And with this wand, you can do one of two things. You can forever change global climate change, anthropogenic global climate change, so that we won't have to ever worry about that again, or you can eliminate racism. Which would you choose? And so the reason I'm mentioning this to you is to piggyback off of this identity issue that you brought up, number one. So it's fascinating to me that things that have an identity level salience in this society right now are put forward as, I think the word you use is insoluble. They're
or unassailable. You can't attack anything behind it, basically.
Right. They're unassailable. And so that's when I think we can use the scale question. And again, I'm riffing off of what you said in terms of an epistemological or cognitive intervention when you're speaking with someone. So which is more important, to like a series of graduated questions, which is more important, to honor someone's pronouns or to clean up the oceans or something? And these should always be left leaning, not like to balance the federal deficit.
Sure. Right? Yeah. Because then you're not getting at the heart of the question, right? You're asking.
And this is the interesting thing about moral epistemology. Moral epistemology is fucking hard, man. It's incredibly complicated. It's incredibly complicated for people who do this for a living. And as I said before, most people will either stand in line or have a particular opinion because they think it makes them a better person, and their reflections on those issues have only been to garner evidence for those positions, or if they've been to figure out what somebody says against it, it's only been to garner the evidence against and the arguments against, which is kind of like a Christian apologetics, and that's being charitable to it. And so I think these identity level issues, my current thinking, and I could be completely wrong about this, my current thinking is that those are best asked. You can't ask someone, well, why is identity so important to you over something else? But you can offer them a series of questions like, oh, which is more important than some facet of their identity versus something else that they would already agree with. I think that this is just an example. I mean, we've become preoccupied with identity characteristics, utterly preoccupied. And we know where it comes from. It comes from the university. It comes from Kimberly Crenshaw's mapping the margins and intersectionality, and to a certain extent, critical race theory, which I don't want to get into. I'm sick of talking about that too.
Sure.
But I do think that there are ways to break through people's identity concerns, or to break through, not concerns, but infatuation with identity.
I agree for a personal conversation, a micro level, but the to have that carry over into something that they like express from genotype to phenotype, something they actually put out in the world, seems really difficult because of the institutional part. Yeah. So I think there are 100%. Conversations where I can get somebody and it's like, I know I've got you thinking about it. But this is always the joke on my stream is I'll bring somebody on and they'll have this simulacrum of who I am or what I've said in the past. Like, Destiny, you hate rape victims. And we'll talk for it'll take 5 minutes. And they'll be like, oh, everything you said about this is pretty reasonable. Maybe you're kind of a jerk, but actually I fully agree with you. And then the joke will always be, and I will tell them this, within 24 hours, you're going to be back attacking me on Twitter. And they'll even laugh about it. And it has always happened. It's 12 hours later, they'll be tweeting out, you know what? Destiny actually played some mind games on me. I think he I didn't actually like that. Fuck him. He actually hates rape victims even more than I thought. And it's a joke on my stream where people will watch for the 24 hours after. Yeah. And that going back into the prior area, it's almost like you take a guy and it's like, what's the best way to break an addiction to any substance? The number one predictor, I don't know if this is true, but anecdotally I know it's a very high predictor, is get them away from whatever fucking group of friends they were with before. Because if you take a druggie, you break the habit and you put them right back into their group of druggie friends, they're gone. It's almost a waste of time at that point.
Yeah. Johan Hari has some great stuff about that. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's community, things like that.
Sure, yeah.
And what you said about the person attacking you on Twitter once they go on your stream or talk to you. So there's some really interesting literature in hostage negotiations. That's why people are kept in cults, is from their communities, from the people who love them, the people they love, the relationships, excuse me, that milieu, that network of relationships they develop. And disrupting that relationship network is the way to get people out of a cult. We also know that, I think Mike Warner told me this years ago, someone did data, I haven't read the study myself, I'm just going off what he told me, excuse me, about whether or not someone will stay in a new church is based upon how many people, their associations they make. And I think I could be completely wrong, I think it's like 3 people in 3 months and 6 people in 6 months dramatically increases the likelihood that they'll stay in the church. But in the same vein, so you'll talk to someone, you'll perform an intervention, but the problem will be they'll go back into their communities, their friends, where they're going to get likes, and they'll attack you. Right? So that's a problem. I guess it's a problem only if you care that it's a problem. But the larger thing is, when you said it works in one-on-one conversations, but it won't work larger, but you're on YouTube. That's what you're doing. Like, you're putting those one-on-one conversations out where I don't know how many people watch your stuff, tens of thousands, I guess, maybe even hundreds. I don't even know how many people, but you're putting these conversations out where other people see this and they see whatever they had in themselves, that they can see this modeled. But I think that the tricky thing for people to realize is that as much as they may love you and think you're a cool dude and smart dude or whatever, you can still be wrong about stuff, right? And so just because you can, out fence, if you will, intellectually somebody, that doesn't mean that that person was wrong. It just means they couldn't keep up with the argument. So I guess in that sense, I think being an iconoclast is somewhat important, or being somebody who's willing to challenge your heroes and your gods. And I guess the onus is on you in those situations to say, hey man, and I guess, I'm pretty good at, I'm a pretty good perceiver of deceivers, and I don't think you're a deceiver.
Hopefully.
The the onus is on you when you've made a mistake is to come out and say, hey, I made a mistake. And if you really want to blow someone away, like completely blow someone away, write about this in a book, when you have a conversation with someone, just change your mind in real time. Like if someone makes an argument that you hadn't thought of, or says something, wow, man, I hadn't thought about that. I guess I'll change my mind on that.
I think insofar as my audience is concerned, hopefully, my sincerity is usually one of the biggest draws, because I will admit there are times when people that are opposite to me either make good points, and then I'm very careful to, if I notice, it doesn't happen as often anymore, thankfully, because I prepare more, but if it does happen that I come against an argument and I can tell this person is way more well-versed than me on this, I'm not gonna, like, the argument's over, like, I'll just start asking questions and then, figure out afterwards, like, where I wanna go, because I'm not gonna sit there and pretend to be able to engage with them when they're clearly, like, multiple levels above me in that conversation.
And that's how you maintain your integrity, and I would say that that's the perfect long-term strategy, why people will keep listening to you, because they don't want people yearn, Aristotle talks about this, people yearn to know what's true. I yearn to know what's true. Everyone yearns to know what's true.
I got in really big trouble on I super disagree with you. Convince me. I hope you can convince me otherwise. I got in trouble because I was on a stage. I did a debate a while ago in New York City there was a Minds event, and I said that, and everybody booed me. Everybody booed me on a serious event, and I said that humans are not fundamentally truth-seeking things. I think that's a very queer. That's like a very not. I think you have to train that. And I think you see this with our engagement of like stats, numbers, instinct, how we do heuristics. Like if I have like one or two bad experiences with a type of person or type of thing, I'm likely to never engage with it again. There's a really good quote. A cat that puts its paw on the hot stove will never put its paw on a hot stove again, but it'll also never put its paw on a cold stove. We're very quick. We have all these cognitive biases. If you've taken like even a basic psych class, you learn how fucked our mind is. I feel like I think people say sometimes, and there are some people, I hope that I want to know what's true. You come across as somebody that wants to know what's true. But I think that the scary thing is people will sometimes say that, but they don't really. They'll say, I want to know what's true. And it's like, do you really? Or because every behavior that you're exhibiting just reeks of somebody looking to confirm what they already know or believe is true.
Okay. So let me pause you right there. So instead of every behavior, you're that defensive posture, right? So that your question, when people say they want to, like, I have some questions I ask. So if you were in a monogamous relationship with your significant other, would you want to know they were cheating on you? So like when you spill into the moral domain, when you spill into the emotional domain, you can really kind of flesh that out and test a little bit. But so let's go back to the idea that, so you think,
I think we fundamentally seek what pleasures or comforts us, maybe a little hedonistic. And sometimes truth is a good vehicle to find that. So in the form of like science and technology, truth is incredibly valuable, because when we learn true things scientifically, we can apply that in a technological tool and then we make our lives better. But when it comes to questions of like politics or moral philosophy, I think that truth is just a vehicle that pleases us. But when it's not convenient, we cast it aside and then we go down other roads epistemically to find things that suit us, right? Like in terms of like confirmation bias and everything. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question. So let's bracket the truth thing, and then I actually have to go. I'm intermittent fasting, which is the other thing I would have told myself at 33. Like intermittent fast. Don't eat. I've been told my whole life breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Actually, it's the least.
It's the worst meal of the day, especially if you're an American. Oh my God.
That's correct. That's correct. Okay, so let's forget about truth for a second.
Sure.
Let's bracket and say, do you think that all people desire to know?
To know what?
Oh, to know about the world, to know about themselves. To I think the world in themselves covers it.
I would say that people, okay, I swear I'm not trying to avoid your question, or I'll give you a yes or no after.
No, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine.
I'm instrumentalist when it comes to truth. I think that people view truth as an instrument by which they can make themselves happier, and insofar as it no longer serves that function, they no longer care about the truth. So people want to know insofar as that knowledge makes them feel better about themselves. But if that knowledge leads them down a bad way, then it'll cast aside. The easiest example of this, I hate to hit on trans issues, but goes with the self-ID for trans people thing, right? Like, do you really want to know for the fact of the matter if somebody is actually trans? Well, in that case, no. The scientific knowledge, actually, no, I don't care anymore. It's just about this. I have a new epistemic approach to that, and it's whatever is the most morally right thing. So you don't want to know anymore. You know, that's how I would view it. So I would say no. People don't want to know fundamentally, or not for the sake of knowing.
Okay, so just so that I'm clear, is it that you think that there are some people who, I guess there are multiple questions here. Is it like the Garden of Eden thing? Do people not want to know what horror? I mean, I don't want to know what it's like to chop off my arm and then chop off my arm. Then I can have knowledge of what it was like to have my arm chopped off. But I'm talking about somewhat more pedestrian things. Do you think people want to know if people are talking negatively about them? I mean, do you think people would want?
I think most people would want to know that. Yeah.
All right. So, are you? If I don't want to be overly personal, but are you in a relationship with someone?
Yeah, married.
Is it? You're married? Yeah. Is it a monogamous relationship?
Nope, it's a degenerate one.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say then the example of if he or she, is a woman?
Yeah.
Okay. So the example of if they'd be faithful to you doesn't count. But yeah, I actually have to go, and I would love to continue this.
You're super good. We can set up a chat some other time if you ever want to. I don't want to keep you from anything, but do you have any final closing words? What's a platform you want to promote or something? There's 7,500 people watching right now, so and then it'll probably go up on YouTube later. So.
Well, thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed the chat. I'm sorry I have to go. I'm 14 minutes behind.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah, so I appreciate you talking to me, and I'm just very grateful to give that you've taken a look at those videos and that you're doing the work that you do. So you can watch my stuff on YouTube, Peter Boghossian, Boghossian. I'm on Twitter. I'm on actually a bunch of stuff. I don't even know what. TikTok. My daughter told me to go on that. We're on that too. I do a lot of talks. Yeah, so I just appreciate it, and I guess the final words are really listen to people more. Just speaking to your audience, we can't all be right about everything. And one of the ways it's a great opportunity to figure out if we're right is if we listen and then repeat back what we thought we heard from somebody. It's another thing I wish I could give myself at 33. I think people will find that to be incredibly helpful. So, and then if I have National Progress Alliance, where we're doing all kinds of fun stuff, we have the show All Things Reconsidered coming out. It's an analysis of NPR that has a bunch of funny and weird things to kind of restore trust and legitimacy to the publicly funded National Public Radio. So I appreciate it, man. I appreciate being on your show and the opportunity to talk to you. So thanks a lot.
Cool. Well, it was fun. Hopefully we chat again in the future. And yeah, do you live in Hungary? Or are you in the United States? Or
I'm in Portland, Oregon at the moment. But I just fell in love with it last time I was there. I'm going there again, and it's cool. I get to do talks about anything I want. I just travel all over the country and give talks about scientific skepticism. It's a very Christian country, so I've even given talks about atheism, which is kind of interesting. The audiences perk up and such. It's an amazing opportunity.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, hey, I really appreciate the chat. It's been fun.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Have a good one. Good luck.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Bye. He was so disgusted by my non-monogamy. He left immediately.